Well, there's nothing like failing to launch. 4 years ago, back in 2020, the federal Liberal government announced a ban on thousands of firearms in this country, and they were going to offer a buyback. Here we are 4 years later, and well, we're getting there slowly, but just before the program was about to launch, the government added hundreds more models to the prohibited firearms list, and that just makes things muddier and muddier. Wes Winkle is the president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association and joins us for a conversation. And I, Wes, when you heard last week that now even more firearms had been added to the list for these potential buybacks, what did you think when you heard that?
Well, we didn't get much advance notice, that's for sure. And our industry is typically about 6 months out in an order cycle. So it was very disappointing, but more devastating to our industry to get that kind of news last week. Our industry's already been reeling from so many prohibitions. To add more to the list is absolutely devastating.
Your association supported the Liberal government last year in helping to catalog the prohibited firearms. What did your work look like? How did that go?
So it definitely would slightly correct the word support. Dragged along kicking and screaming. We don't have a lot of choice in the situation. The prohibition was already there. We were asked to help provide pricing, and we thought it was the best to help with that process and support our members by making sure that there was an adequate compensation offered.
That's where the support would be, obviously, in your members, and making sure that the compensation offered was something that would be acceptable if these firearms are going to be taken away.
Yes, we're trying to fight for the best we can. And not all the pricing that we provided was used. There was other demographics that were used to provide pricing, but we provided what we thought was the fairest pricing for our members, for sure.
So in general, Wes, as firearms owners, legal licensed firearms owners in this country, do you feel particularly hard done by this federal government?
Absolutely. This federal government has used firearms laws as a way to try to boost their popularity in urban centers like Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto. And whenever they see dips in the polls, they go back to the prohibiting more firearms to try to shore up support in those areas, regardless if it's good public safety policy at all.
So what happens now beginning in January of 2025, including these hundreds of more firearms that have been added to the list? I understand now we're talking about 500 plus different firearms that are on the list that are now restricted, must be returned and bought back. What does that look like starting next month?
Well, it's a full-out prohibition. They're not restricted, so it's a full-out prohibition. So the firearms cannot be sold. They cannot transfer ownership. They cannot be used. So once again, they get added to the piles inside of all of our businesses of the prohibited firearms from May of 2020. And now they just sit there. We have to insure them. We have to maintain them, but there's no method yet to dispose of them. Again, to continue to tie up warehouse space and, more importantly, financial dollars for our business.
And you talk about them sitting there, and you made reference to 2020. For 4 years now, coming up on 5, retailers have been sitting on these firearms, making sure they're safe, stored, etc., without any place to move them on.
Correct. We've had to maintain them. We've had to pay insurance on them. There's been no movement at all. And it's not just at the retail level, but their wholesalers have significant inventory, as do manufacturers in Canada. So there's a lot of businesses that are in a tough financial position.
Is there any way in your mind, Wes, that there could be adequate financial compensation for all of this?
I don't believe there's a budget allocation for that at all. I don't. When you see the amnesty dates being pushed off till the end of the next federal election, I think that there's a plan to get some firearms collected and destroyed, enough probably to make some good videos of firearms being collected and destroyed. But I don't believe you're going to see a full-scale confiscation program ever get off the ground.
You mentioned earlier that this seems to be a tactic on the part of the federal government, and frankly, I wouldn't disagree. If there's a sag in the polls or there's an opportunity to bolster some support in urban centers, these are the kinds of announcements that we get. For those who are in urban centers, and we cover a number of them here from our radio station, Wes, Can you give us a sense of, because when we hear, well, this assault-style firearm, for example, is going to be banned. What kinds of firearms are we talking about here? For those that don't fully understand what they are and what they might be used for, what kinds of firearms are being banned?
Well, so what's being banned is what we call modern sporting rifles. And these are the rifles that are modular in design, and they are the most modern designed hunting rifles and sport shooting rifles in our industry. They are no way, shape, or form assault rifles or military-style rifles. However, some of them do have the look of that to people that are uneducated on the subject. And that's what the Liberals go with the term assault style. They keep using that because it's a style. It's not an actual mechanical definition. And therefore, we end up gathering up or prohibiting rifles that are used in competition and rifles that are used for hunting all over Canada. They only look somewhat similar in nature, but they have no mechanical similarities.
Will these efforts to buy back these now banned firearms, in your opinion, reduce the gun violence that we've seen in Canada?
Absolutely not. And that's what I think people in urban centers have to understand. If you may not have a knowledge of the firearms industry, that's okay. But listen to your law enforcement agencies that are not supporting these measures at all. They get it very clear that this is a bad allocation of funds. Money equals crime reduction if it's put in the right areas. And this is not being put in the right areas. And the police agencies all over the country are screaming for some help, but they're not asking for more gun laws or more gun bans. And they've been very clear that they're not working at all. Since the May 2021s, we've seen an increase in gun crime. The criminal world and restricting legal firearms have nothing to do with each other.
Where would the money be better allocated?
You know, I would always talk to people in public safety for those answers. I'm not an expert in that category, but people in police agencies are saying that they need help with enforcement on the streets. They need help with better prosecution. They need help with jail time. But more importantly, from where we sit, we see that people are talking about trying to reduce the demand for firearms. Firearms are very easy to get for people in the criminal realm. They're not hard to get. So the key is to invest in your communities and make sure that the youth are not being brought into gang situations or gang crime.
And again, just by way of explanation for those who may not fully understand what a firearms owner faces in terms of regulation, etc. If I owned one of these now banned firearms in Canada, what did I have to go through in order to obtain it legally before it was banned and to maintain my license to hold that firearm?
Yes, you have to pass a written and a practical course, and you must submit a very detailed application, go through RCMP background screening, be vetted by 2 different police agencies, and then you'll be issued a firearms license. Then you can come to the store and apply to buy the firearm, or we have to do another screening process and make sure you pass that and obtain a screening number before you're allowed to take it home. Once you get it home, you have to put it in a lock safe with trigger locks on it, and there's many safety storage requirements for both the firearms and the ammunition. The people that own these firearms are not a public safety risk in any way, shape, or form. The RCMP has proven that by giving them their license. It is really bad policy to take firearms away from these people that have jumped through all the hoops to legally obtain them.
Wes, I appreciate your time on the show today. Thank you very much for being here. Wes 𝐚𝐤𝐿𝐥𝐮𝐫𝐞